This is 5-Minute Feng Shui, episode 44, Understanding the Two Types of Feng Shui. Welcome to the 5-Minute Feng Shui podcast, where each week I talk about how to move energy and make money. You'll learn how to create a prosperous home and an abundant life using classical Chinese Feng Shui. I'm your host, Katie Weber, publisher of the Red Lotus Letter, Feng Shui Easing for Wealth. Each week, I'll cover Feng Shui topics that can help you improve your life, share inspiring stories, and always end with 3 easy-to-implement Feng Shui tips that you can put to work right away, and usually in about 5 minutes. Now let's get started on the 5 minutes that could change your life. You know, there is a lot of confusion around Feng Shui, with a lot of that confusion centering around the directions of whether it's north or house or this corner or that corner, that kind of thing. And that's because there is a little bit of misunderstanding about the two types of Feng Shui. And that's really what I want to cover today. In addition to just kind of giving you a little bit of a background about my history with Feng Shui, because I thought it might be helpful for you just to hear, how this all kind of came about in my life. And so let's jump right in. So the most common type of Feng Shui practice in America and much of the West is called Black Hat or Tibetan Black Hat Sect, and it's sometimes called Western Feng Shui. Now, the type that is practiced in Asia and the type that you'll find, in Singapore or Hong Kong or any of most Asian countries anyhow, that is called classical Chinese Feng Shui. Now, each one has its own advantages and disadvantages. Now, both forms use the same bagua and the same 5 elements, with the only difference really is that the classical Chinese Feng Shui aligns the bagua with the actual compass direction of the front door. So whether that's east or north or south. By contrast, Black Hat aligns the bagua by the front and rear of the house, with the front always being north and the south is directly opposite, and the back left corner of your house is the wealth corner, and the back right of the house is always the marriage corner. It's very prescribed in that way. So it doesn't matter if what direction your house faces, they all have that sort of same alignment. The front is north, the rear is south, and that. Now here in the U.S., Black Hat is this sort of the shortened version of Tibetan Black Hat Sect Feng Shui. We're just going to call it Black Hat. This is typically the preferred method of Feng Shui because it's how easy it is to apply. The front's always north, the back left is always the wealth corner, the rear right is always the romance direction, and that's irrespective of those compass directions like we were just talking about. And the Black Hat Feng Shui is often considered more spiritually oriented versus the classical Feng Shui. Now, its disadvantage is that it doesn't take into account the unique compass directions of a home or time and the influence of time. So for instance, in classical Chinese Feng Shui, this is not this is more related to like you hear year of the pig, year of the rat, what have you. It admits that your home actually is influenced by time, and we know that to be a fact, that our home is, we see the paint peeling or we develop a leak or something like that. So we know time has an influence over us and our homes as well. Now, in classical Chinese Feng Shui, this is really beginning to catch on in the U.S., particularly as more Asians immigrate to America, and also from the increasing interest and investment from Chinese companies and the Chinese influence that we have now in the world, in fact. Now, Asian families are also looking for certain home features that are considered good Feng Shui. That's in classical terms, making the popularity and rise of homes being built with Feng Shui considerations being taken into account. Many realtors are seeing that too, that clients are asking for particular homes that have particular elements and have what they consider good Feng Shui. Another consideration is that Black Hat, the one that's practiced more here in the U.S., also recommends certain things like water fountains and plants in bedrooms and activating bathrooms, where this is completely taboo in classical Chinese Feng Shui because this is just not considered a place that we want to activate. We don't want activated bedrooms because we need to rest there. We don't want activated bathrooms because, well, this is where we get rid of bodily waste and we clean ourselves and so on. So let's look at some of the critical differences between these two. That's just kind of a starting point, really. Now, the first critical one is that the front is always north and the rear is always south. And that's just not the way classical Chinese Feng Shui is built. This is probably the biggest difference. So when you're just starting out with Feng Shui, you often want to use the Black Hat method because it's much more cut and dried and simple to apply. But in classical Chinese Feng Shui, you're going to take into account the actual directions by using a compass to determine the corners and the facing direction of your door. So if your house faces southwest, then you move the bagua to the southwest and it becomes the front and center, and then the south is on the left and the west is on the right of the front door as you are in the house. Now, while Black Hat essentially uses the same map for every house, the classical Chinese Feng Shui includes those nuances that come with arranging the bagua according to your home's actual directions, whether that's southeast, southwest, north, or east. And that has an impact on the energies of your home and your life, because this is what we're talking about, is that your home essentially is a vessel for you, your body, your home, and your life. Like you are a vessel for your spirit, your home is a vessel for you. So your home has a reflection, it reflects out into your life. Now, another thing that's a difference with Black Hat from classical is the use of mirrors. So both forms of Feng Shui do like mirrors, they just don't always agree on how to use them. So for instance, Black Hat recommends using mirrors behind a stove to quote unquote double the amount of food being prepared. And while that does seem true, this is problematic from a classical Feng Shui standpoint because it's also doubles the fire energy. And a little fire is a good thing, but too much can burn the house down. You know, fire can easily go out of control and cause arguments, injuries, nervous anxiety, the inability to hold on to money, not to mention just being dangerous. So while we want to double food, it's because of the wealth implications, we don't want to double the fire. It would be much better to use a mirror in the dining room where you're seeing people enjoying the food, not somebody preparing it, and you're doubling up that fire energy, irrespective of whether you have a stove that's a gas stove or an electric stove. So we don't want to use mirrors over toilets either. Many times you'll see mirrors over toilets, and you'll see mirrors, like I said, over the stove, or they'll put mirrors at the front of a house many times opposite the front door. These are just all no-nos in classical Chinese Feng Shui. Now, the other thing, there's another element, and that's when, let's say if you work with a Feng Shui consultant, I'll take your credit card or check or however you want to pay me. But many times in classical or in Black Hat Feng Shui, red envelopes, which are considered to be very auspicious by the Chinese, is sometimes Black Hat practitioners will ask to be paid in a red envelope. They'll give you the red envelope and ask you to send money, put money in it. And, this may construe to having some kind of a mystical type of element with a Feng Shui practitioner who asks to be paid in red envelopes. And they're really, it's a lovely thing. They're called Hongbao, and these red envelopes are given at New Year, like we do, in the West, children get stockings for Christmas or gold coins for Passover. This is a type of thing that the Chinese and Asians do. They'll give the Hongbao, the little red envelopes to children with money, just as as a fortune and favor at the beginning of the new year. But you may not necessarily want to pay your client that way or pay your practitioner that way. Classical Chinese Feng Shui consultants will just take your payment however you give it to them. So you don't have to do anything in a special way or in a ritualistic way when you're working with a consultant. Now, the other difference is bathrooms are not shrines. Now, there's a big difference here in terms of the the bathroom being activated versus not activated. Black Hat Sect will activate it. They'll put in all kinds of beautiful things. And while you should have a lovely bathroom, there's nobody arguing about that. You don't want to enhance it. So, for instance, if your bathroom falls in the wealth corner, it doesn't matter whether that's the wealth corner in classical or the wealth corner in Black Hat. In classical, Black Hat would might say add plants in there, make it, add green colors. Well, you're activating the waste and the cleaning that goes on in the bathroom from the classical perspective. Classical perspective says we want to kind of hold down that energy and kind of just let the bathroom be the bathroom, but we don't want to activate it according to the wealth direction. That's what we would do in the living room instead. You would want, because that's an area where your family comes together, and where you can sort of create like a small map of your entire house in the living room, and you can activate there instead. You don't want to activate a toilet or the draining effect of a bathtub or a sink, something like that. So we don't want to treat them like with a lot of candles and decorating and all that kind of thing. We don't want to tie any red ribbons around pipes or toilets or anything like that. So, that's a big difference, is that bathrooms are not shrines. Now, time is another critical difference between the two. Time is the element that nobody can escape, right? We all are under the influence of time. It's probably one of the single most important differences between these two types of Feng Shui. Black Hat centers around placement, whereas classical Feng Shui understands that place is relative to time, just like we're subject to changing of time. Time is part of that classical Feng Shui, because basically you can't just Feng Shui and forget it. Time is dynamic. Feng Shui is dynamic, living energy that shifts and changes with the months and the year. That's why there's so much emphasis on the annual Feng Shui that brings details about each year, whether it's the year of the tiger, year of the horse. It brings a different set of energies. That's why one year you can have an absolutely fabulous year, because maybe you've got really great energy at the front of your home or the direction that your home faces, and then the next year it's not as good. So you may be wondering, why is it my life changed so radically from one year to the next when I have done nothing differently? Well, it's because time has a role, and it has an influence on our homes and our lives. So it's really important difference between the two types of Feng Shui. Now, true confession, when I started working as a Feng Shui practitioner, this is way back in the late 80s when I learned about Feng Shui, and I started practicing it. I had heard about it when I was traveling overseas. I lived in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a remote atoll. Yes, a desert island. I actually lived on a desert island, and I got to tour all around Asia, and that's where I heard about Feng Shui. And that's where I saw such a stark contrast in terms of the differences. I saw true Asian Feng Shui, and then I came back to America, learned the Black Hat Feng Shui. And I started with Black Hat because, back in the day, it was really about the only energy or the only information available about Feng Shui. And so it was easy to apply, and it did help me get some results, but some other results completely eluded me. Not only that, but I did have some very bad outcomes from some of the recommendations that I was following at that time when I was doing Black Hat, when I started that way. And I had used the mirror behind my stove technique, and my husband and I argued like there was no tomorrow. I also hung up a bagua mirror that pointed toward an annoying neighbor, and that was the moment I left Black Hat forever. This neighbor's dog attacked me and mauled my leg, bit my husband's hands or wrist as he was trying to choke the dog to death from getting him off my leg. It looked like a murder had been committed in our driveway, when we're bleeding everywhere, and it was really, really awful. And it's in the same place that this bagua was pointed. Now, bagua mirrors are not something that you ever want to use. And this gruesome and traumatic scene also involved news helicopters, ambulances, and many months for my leg to heal and get back to normal. And I've since learned that a bagua mirror sends out so much negative energy to you that to wherever it's aimed, it sends out so much negative energy that wherever it's aimed, that that comes back to you. That energy comes back to you. And as soon as I limped back in the house from the hospital, I tore that back wall down and I never used it. And that's when I decided to learn about classical feng shui and to go overseas for training. And once I did, the results were astounding. And rather than placed in harm's way, I was removed from it. Now, I know that there are a lot of people who love Black Hat and it works for them and it makes them happy. And if it does, if it works for you and you don't have any problems with it and you love it and you like the elements of it, you should absolutely keep doing that. You keep practicing that. But if you don't feel like it's addressing everything that you need to address, or you've feng shuied your house according to these principles but somehow nothing's really kicked off for you, then maybe classical feng shui is going to give you the kind of results that you're looking for and will address some of the things that come up for you, such as time and so on. When you get will you get results from Black Hat if you use it? Very possibly, but I think you really only have about a 30% chance of getting it right personally. And could you be hurt by it? Yeah, I think you can, especially if you put the wrong enhancements in the wrong places. You can end up with severe problems like adding fire in the northwest corner because it's opposite the front of the house. This could cause the breadwinner to be seriously harmed through illness, job loss, or just because he up and leaves. And that's just the beginning. Now, I love Black Hat Feng Shui. It was how I got started. You could say it was my gateway drug to the more nuanced classical Feng Shui. Obviously, I'm very fond of that. But I've seen things that have happened, in the course of doing this for over 20 years with tens of thousands of subscribers. And the problem is I outgrew Black Hat, and I just needed more in-depth understanding versus a cookie cutter kind of approach. And I found out that it all of a sudden things made more sense to me, and I saw where my home, if I arranged it by the actual compass directions, that meant that I was in alignment with the Earth's energies, not as opposed to something that's just being prescribed that way. It's kind of like being prescribed aspirin by your doctor for no matter what your ailment is. It's great for a headache or a mild muscle strain, but it's not going to do anything for you if you have a broken bone or an ingrown toenail. You need a specific treatment for a specific problem. And that's what classical feng shui gave me, an arsenal of understanding and tools to address a lot of different problems for all the different types of houses they were and directions and people, and all taking time into account as well. I believe that we don't live in a vacuum, so I saw no reason why feng shui should either. So let's get on with those 3 tips. Tip number 1, if you have a specific problem or something that you feel like it's just not quite right in terms of how you're applying feng shui, or it's not really working for you, try classical feng shui. I think it will make a lot more sense, and you're going to harmonize your house with the actual compass directions. And that really can help you work with energy instead of sometimes working against it. If you just make that arbitrary, okay, the north is the front of the house, or the door where my bedroom is, or what have you. So number 2 is definitely follow classical guidelines of no plants and no water in the bedroom. We don't want to activate the bedroom. The bedroom is a very, very important part of feng shui. It's where you rest. It's where you are able to garner your energy. The only thing that should go on in a bedroom is rest and romance. But if you've got plants and water, hearing water like fountains, this is what when I see these things on decorating shows and they say, oh, add these feng shui elements to your bedroom, I just cringe. Because if you're in bed and you're hearing water running, then that can lead to serious loss of money as well as loss of health. It is dangerous for your health, in fact, to hear water running at night. That's why you always want to make sure that those drips and running toilets and things like that are always corrected. You never want to listen to water running at night. So follow those those recommendations and avoid activating bedrooms with plants and flowers, or making a shrine out of your bathroom. And last one is use those real directions, not those prescribed ones. This is going to make all the difference in the world in terms of the way your house functions for you. You're going to feel like suddenly, like those little games that you get, in Cracker Jack or from the gum machines, where they have it's a little game and it has little balls that you're trying to rotate and get it to fit in those little things, the little indentations, and you roll it around till it fits in that indentation. All of a sudden it's like, it's fitting, it's making sense. And I think you'll find that makes sense, because we always want to use sense and common sense in Feng Shui. That's one of the things that I often call Feng Shui is 5,000 years of common sense. And many people will tell me during a consultation, when I tell them how to arrange their bedroom or their home office, oh, that just makes sense. And I say, well, it makes so much sense you weren't doing it. So let's think about that. You want to always do things that make sense to you. And for me, following actual directions makes a lot of sense. Even if something seems silly, don't do it. And that means like putting mirrors over toilets. You don't want to have people walking into your house going, why is there a mirror over the toilet? Or why do you have a mirror at the back of the stove? It's, first of all, you're going to have to clean it all the time if you do any kind of cooking at all. You always don't, and telling you to always, tie red ribbons around pipes and that kind of stuff. It's just silly. And silliness isn't what we're after. We're after results. We're after a better life. We're after seeing our lives stay on a steady upward trajectory, right? Okay, well, those are your 3 tips. I know that third tip was rather lengthy, but I hope you enjoyed today's episode about the differences between the 2 types of Feng Shui. And no matter which one you choose and no matter which one you use the one that works best for you. That's always the best recommendation. So if Black Hat makes you happy, then I'd be the last one to tell you not to use it. But if you feel like you want something a little bit more, or something a little bit different, or something that explains why some things might have happened in your home and life, many times classical can answer those questions for you. All right, I'll talk to you on the next episode of 5 Minutes Feng Shui. Thanks for being with me today. Thanks for listening today to 5 Minute Feng Shui. Be sure to join me on Facebook at facebook.com/Feng Shui Katie. And if you're really ready to move ahead quickly, head over to redlotusletter.com and sign up for my free 4-week e-course, 28 Days to Prosperity. You'll get daily lessons and tips on how to get unstuck and create financial flow in your life. Make it a fantastic day.